Hello, welcome to a special Dwarf Fortress video. I've been doing mostly just playthroughs, but figure some people watching might be trying to garner some information from the things I'm doing, and I'm normally not very good about elaborating on what I am doing or why I'm doing it. I tend to just play the game. Now, I'm going to take this time to go through Dwarf Fortress and create a new world and explain why I do the things that I do. Now, I'm not as good as some people out there. There's definitely better people to be getting your advice from, I would say. But if you're coming to me for some advice, I'm going to give it to you right here. Alright, first off, before we even create a new world, in order to optimize your Dwarf Fortress, you want to make sure your resolution is set low, okay? It might sound like it shouldn't be that big of a deal, but trust me, currently it didn't used to be this way. This is specific to the Steam release, but currently the graphical data is run through the CPU instead of the GPU. So your big graphics card does nothing for Dwarf Fortress at the moment until, I assume, they change this threading in the future. It will likely happen soon. These settings, I left most of this at default. That's good. Here's the new one that just added in the update. You can change it to the classic ASCII style, and that's neat. That's real neat. Alright, my audio is set so that you can hear me better, but you can still hear the music over my voice if you so desire. I really dig the soundtrack to this. It adds a lot to it. The tracks have been playing in my head. They wake me up in the morning. I might have a problem. Alright, the game, one of the things you're going to want to do is make sure that your autosave frequency is set up somewhere reasonable. I currently have it set to seasonal. I think that's the lowest increment you can have it on, unless you can also do it on monthly. But monthly is a bit much, because the saving process and all that. But if you are experiencing crashes, and you can set it to something other than, yeah, see, seasonal is the lowest, so that's what I do. Have your other autosave options on, just because it sucks to lose a whole bunch of progress because something happened. Leave the pause on, etc. Most of these are just all the default options. However, there is one important one that I wanted to point out here. Let's see, you can adjust like how fast things scroll, how often your keys repeat when you hold them. I think this right here, the game frames per second. The default is 100. I lowered mine slightly because I like to have a little bit more wiggle room in the very early game, but soon this frame cap won't really affect your game too much because you're going to have a lot going on, and it's going to be somewhere under that unless you've got an extremely beefy computer. But if you ever want to adjust things so that you have more time in the early game to do stuff, just turn this setting down a little bit. Some people say that like 40 to 50 is a good setting. I just play with it a little bit farther down. That way I've got, you know, a little bit more wiggle room time-wise to get things in order in the early game. Key bindings, I've got all this set to default. Macros are important, but I don't use them. And I probably should. It would save me a lot of clicks and time, but I don't use them. So, if you use macros, good for you. You probably can do things a lot faster and more efficiently than I can. Alright, now let's get into the actual meat of the game. What we're going to do is create a new world, and this will give you the usual text box about, you know, what your default goals should be and all that, but basically it's just, you know, things. It's telling you, hey, you're about to embark, choose what you want to do. Okay, so, in this screen, this stuff is actually real important to your overall experience from here. If you leave everything on the default values, which is this, it's both going to be extremely easy and fairly difficult. Like, and when I say fairly, I mean in the sense that this game can be fair, okay? You set these, the number of beasts, the natural savagery higher. That might impact your game if you don't also set this higher, okay? Alright, since the world is simulated and all that, stuff happens. And if the number of beasts is high and the time is high, that means that there's more time in the world for the number of beasts to get reduced through natural means, or for them to completely overrun civilizations. However, them overrunning them is probably less likely than them eventually getting wiped out over the course of 500 years. Alright, now, usually, the world map size does have a small impact on the later game simulation and how much that impacts your FPS. So, unless you're like dead set on having a big wide world, you can safely set this to pocket to small, you know, that range for your world, and not be missing out on too much. Large areas will impact your FPS in the late game a little bit, but they will also give you far, far more variety in your biome types and what you can find on the world. So, it's your call. You know, sometimes interesting things will pop up in a pocket, but you're going to see far more interesting stuff overall in a large. You know, the best options are, I think, smaller or small, just because small will give you enough variety and smaller will ensure that you're like maintaining maximum FPS while not having a tiny world that's easy to dominate. History length, I explained it a little bit. That's, you know, rivers erode valleys, time passes, things happen. Civilizations rise and fall throughout the course of this period, and how much of that happens, you can choose when to insert yourself into that, you know. If you want to go in 5 years, even with low beasts and low savagery, there's still going to be a lot of nasties out there that want to kill you. And you put your civilizations on very low, there's going to be both fewer enemies and fewer allies. Sites on low or whatever, you know, then you've got fewer natural towns and things like that. So you might get less goblins and you might get less dwarves. So you can set this to lower if you want more options as to where you want to settle, you know, in a later sort of time period game. Typically though, these two options are fine. And for history, yeah, that's how many forgotten beasts and things like that you want to be seeing throughout your playthrough. And if you leave it at 100, that's about the default amount. I mean, they're gonna show up, but they're not gonna be like there all the time. If you pick 5 years, you might see them constantly. If you pick 500 years, you might never see one. Now, number of beasts, yeah, that explains it, right? Forgotten beasts and that sort of thing, yeah. And then natural savagery, that will change the biomes. They may tend more towards wilds and so on and so forth, and I'm not sure if that impacts the alignment of the regions, but it may also do something for that. So for this, since this is just a tutorial, we're gonna go, hold on a moment. Terribly sorry. Terribly sorry about that. Neighbors came by to give me some Christmas cookies. This will be... Sorry. I tend not to cut stuff out, so it's unlikely I'm going to cut all that space out. At any rate, we're going to set this up so that we can easily get in, and yeah. And then for detailed mode, I don't really mess with these settings at all, so... Although I assume if you go and look into this, you can probably find ways to make your biome interesting. But we're just gonna go with this. That way I can create a little fort easily and show you the basics of getting started and doing that. Alright, yeah, you know, you should know the drill as far as simulation goes. Wow, that's all the history of this world. Not much. Okay, you can keep the world and go back if you want to check out Legends mode and all that, but we're just gonna go ahead and play now. Oh, I guess you can check Legends through here. We don't need to, though. We will skip the tutorial. We need to find our embark location. These are important settings here to look through when you are creating your area. You're always going to be sorry, you're going to want to make sure that you pick a biome that is right for the fort that you want to build. Okay, you can pick hard areas, you can pick easy areas, but if you like just adjust a couple of settings in this and find the area, you will it'll make your game a lot easier or harder depending on what you want to do. Alright, I want iron, I want flux, I don't care if there's a light aquifer, but I do not want a heavy aquifer. Heavy aquifers are the type that just gush water as soon as you crack into them. So, but light aquifers are easy to deal with. They drip just a little bit, so it's fine to deal with. Alright, savagery, that's how wild the lands naturally are. Calm is better, untamed wilderness is okay, but animals are still probably going to mess with you just for you fishing and gathering plants. Untamed wilds, you are definitely going to be attacked by wildlife within your first 2 seasons as soon as you embark on one of those. So we're going to set it to calm, that way we don't have too much to worry about. For spirit, good and evil are both problematic. You usually want a normal area if you're going to want an easy embark, okay? So calm, normal area. You can pick an elevation if you want to go higher, that way you've got more soil to work with. Or, well, not soil necessarily, if you want more layers to work with, I should say. There still can potentially be like negative 100, 200 Z levels or something like that, so you don't have to worry about elevation too much, but if you want to make sure that you've got some space, then you probably don't want to settle on low elevation right next to a ocean or something. Temperature, this can vary your gameplay quite a bit, but like it doesn't matter overly much. Like, yeah, going and settling in the frozen biomes is going to be a real hard time because you're going to have to get your own water because everything on the surface is going to be frozen. Settling next to a volcano is also going to be trouble. I'm sure there's going to be a lot less available water near a volcano. So it's the same reason. Both hot and cold limits your water access and other things. Like, you know, it makes it more dangerous in general. Rain, it's it does stuff. I mean, this might have more of an impact on whether or not there are trees in your natural embark. So if you put it on low rain, then you might be embarking in the deserts and plains regions as opposed to a forest. Uh, Drainage, I'm not sure what this matters too much. Uh, I'm guessing that if you're on a high rain with low drainage, this could create problems of flooding. So you don't need to worry about that too much, though. Uh, Fluxstone. Fluxstone is necessary to create steel. And you can embark in areas with iron and no flux and be fine, but you will eventually want that steel. So finding an area with a fluxstone layer is important. Fluxstone is also, uh, it can be dangerous to actually acquire if you don't find fluxstone in any early layers. You might be digging down to like your second cavern before you find some flux. Possibly. I don't know. I still haven't found flux in rough joined. And normally when I find flux, it's closer to the surface than I've had to dig in rough joined. So it's a question of where the flux is. But when you do find the flux and you have iron on that site as well, you're pretty much just set because steel is very, very powerful as a weapon and an armor. So once you get steel, you're good to go. Rivers are fun. And I mean that in both the fun, all your dwarves die sense, and fun, oh man, I can do something interesting with this sense, if you understand what I'm saying. Uh, it's, if this game has working, like, hydraulic mechanics, like the water actually moves in a logical way, and it can have pressure behind it and so on and so forth. And there are ways to filter salt out of ocean water and things like that. So, working with water in this game can definitely be a lot of fun, and embarking with a river on your site is also often pretty cool. Topsoil, if you want to be able to plant without having to flood something, you need a little bit. So, just make sure you've got a little bit of soil, and you should have a layer or two that you can dig into to set up farm plots on. If your embark site has no soil, you will need to flood a cavern area in order to create mud so that you can actually plant some things. And it will be difficult to do that in a timely fashion if you're unfamiliar with the game. So that's normally embarking on sites without soil. That's for someone who knows what they're doing ahead of time. You don't want to embark on a site with no soil, with no idea how you're going to get planting going. For clay, clay is good. Clay allows you to make pots and other clay things. Instrument pieces can often be made out of clay. So although it's nice to have, it isn't necessary. You can import it, but it's also quite heavy, so importing clay means that your amount of clay that you're working with will be limited. Sand, you can fire glass from sand. Sand is useful for things in the same vein as clay is. It's mostly decorative. There isn't a lot of functionality behind these clay and sand pieces, but they are still useful materials, and they may have good value when they're worked up. So having clay and sand is something that you may want to consider. Like, I like having clay and sand just so that I have all material options available to me. Also, like I said, instruments can be made out of glass or they can be made out of clay, so having those means that I can eventually be creating more instrument types. This is a list of all the various minerals that can be detected and searched for, so. And just a quick rundown, iron is equivalent to bronze, which you would need a couple of other, I forget which mixes into bronze. I think it's like copper and tin or something like that, but I think you need copper, nickel, and tin. I don't know. There's several different alloys that you can make from this list of the raw minerals. So when you've got access to more of these, you can make more metals, but ultimately in combat, weapons, and like durability, stuff like that, iron and bronze are kings of these, and steel is above that. And then there's other stuff, but if you're getting to that other stuff, you aren't needing tutorials running through all this. So just know that iron and bronze. Bronze is a mixture. Iron is just good on its own. And then with iron and flux, you can make steel. And steel trumps all of the natural minerals. Now, when you're picking your embark site, it's usually a good idea. Oh, darn it. When you're picking your embark site, it's usually a good idea to check cliffs and the elevation beforehand so that you know what you're getting into. You should also mouse over all of the individual little tiles in your zone because they all have their own amount of stuff in them. So, like this is a 4x4 embark right next to the fortress, and we can see what types of minerals it has just by mousing over it, and we can see that some areas have soil, some areas do not. So that means that over here it's just rocky mountains, and then down here we've actually got the clay and sand that we are searching for. Now it does say that they're shallow, which means that they're near the surface. Okay. And the deep soil means that the soil layers are deep. There's probably going to be like at least 5 layers of soil when it says deep soil. Some soil, no wait, I think deep soil is like, there could be like 8 layers, and then some soil is like 3 to 5 layers, and then light soil is just like 1 or 2 layers. Now we'll just pick this spot right here. It's fine. And there's a light aquifer here. We can handle a light aquifer perfectly well. The next setups here, you can turn your enemies off. This disables most threats to your fortress, but it's useful if you're still getting a handle on like production lines and how to set things up properly. The hard economy and the hard enemies, I'm not sure about those settings. I don't know exactly what the change is, so I wouldn't mess with those too much. Uh, the default embark is alright. I've got a profile saved, and you can adjust stuff in here. I don't think if you click this button you can go back. Yeah. Well, at any rate, from this you can change various things on your dwarves. There used to be like a point-based system. Now it's, well, like there used to be a pool of points, and you could adjust dwarf skills from that pool. Now the pool of points only affects animals and items you bring. Now, at any rate, I should have just used the default embark because it's fine to do. But for this, we're just gonna set this up real quick. We're not gonna take too long looking at our people because we don't really mind if things don't work out well. Okay? I'm gonna be real with you. Now, we're gonna take 3 miners to start with. And then we also need fishermen, and can also plant. And we're gonna need a brewer. I'll go ahead and make him a blacksmith as well. And then this last dude, we're just gonna well, our brewer's also going to be our our manager. And then we're going to have yeah, that looks good. Now, the reason I said it that way is just basically we do need some miners early. I put these 3 as miners just because I want to be able to carve out stuff real quick and show what I want to show. And then these other ones are important because they're going to need food and drinks, and they're going to need a manager, and they're going to need a trader. So next up, we want to check this over. We've got some seeds for our embark. We've got other stuff we need, but we do want an extra pickaxe. So that is going to be okay. Alright, now we've got those 3. Now we've also got enough other stuff for the embark. We can usually depart with stuff that are our civilization has domesticated, and apparently we've domesticated elephants, so we're gonna leave with a breeding pair of elephants. I don't know if we can also take cats. Depends on how much they are. They're 11 points. Alright, we can have a breeding pair of cats too. And actually thinking about it, definitely gonna want a breeding pair of dogs as well. So we'll drop that. And there we go. Now this is just for training purposes. Alright, so we are here. This is ceiling appeared. This is my tutorial fort. And I will now explain how to actually get a good embark going. Alright, first off you want to identify what you're looking at. So we see our land here, we're mostly mountains. And if we look up, that's quite the steep climb, which means that there isn't a lot that can be done as far as utilizing this inner mountain space. I mean, we can use these lower levels for sure, but once we get up to about here, it really starts thinning out. So once you know what your area looks like, we've got this ground flat elevation down here. That's good. Alright. Once you know what your area looks like, you're going to want to take a look at what you've got on your embark wagon. And depending on your biome, you may be dealing with thieving animals and the like. So it's important that you get started right away by, first off, you just want to dig in. Find a good spot in a wall or a floor. Dig stairs or dig directly into a mountainside and create a place for your dwarves to like be safe, you know? So we want them to start the digging, and like that's priority number one, okay? Create the area for your dwarves to be safe from stuff. Have space for a stockpile. You know, you want to be able to get your initial items off of the wagon as soon as possible. And you also want to make sure that you're thinking ahead a little bit as to how you're going to set all this up. Once you've got the initial digs set, you will need to make sure that they can be secured later. So, like if I'm digging in here, I want to have enough space that I can put a gate here and raise it in case of an emergency. That way forgotten beasts can't come in. I might want a double chamber set up with another gate back here. That way I can lower one gate, let a squad in, and then open the outer gate to take care of any big threats. In my rough joined fortress, I just built straight into the ground and started from there. And that's an option too. And when you do that, you usually do want to make sure that your entrance is covered completely, which means you put up walls and then you put a ceiling over top of it. But we're gonna let them dig real quick, just so that we can continue on to the next important part. Okay, so now we've got our initial stockpile area set. Another thing that could have been happening while I was doing that was I should have marked some of these trees to cut. That way we've also got a stockpile of wood. If you're concerned about food in the early game, you can always just set a big gather area and they'll pick whatever is ready to be harvested. Some of it may be food, some of it may be cloth and other types of items that need to be processed before they can actually be utilized. Um, Not sure why we started with 3 elephants. Thought I only had 2 on there. Okay. Well, we got an extra elephant for free, I guess. Alright, so at any rate, we've got this area set up. What we're going to want to do is make a stockpile. Now, in the beginning, you're just going to want generalized stockpiles so that you can create whatever you want, like, and have everything be set in there. However, quickly on, you're not going to want corpses and you're not going to want trash in your stockpile. They'll just take up valuable space. So, you can adjust that for early. However, since this is just the embark and we just now dug this out, what we can do is set them to go and put that in. Now, something else that you're going to want real early is a stoneworker's workshop. And you're also going to want a carpenter's workshop, because both of these will be available to you. You'll be able to get wood, you'll be able to get stone. Regardless of your situation, you can make stuff out of both of those. Now we'll just let them go ahead and do some stuff. Alright, so once you've got these set up, you're now into where you can actually do stuff for your fort. Like, you need these 2 shops at least before you can really start to make progress. Once you've got your initial stockpile and shop set up, you're going to want to think about office space, bedrooms, that sort of thing. So we'll just dig in a little bit farther, set up some bedrooms. And currently we have 7 dwarves, so we know we'll only need 7 bedrooms. So we can make 8. And then we can also have office space for our manager to issue work orders from. Now it's also important that you get your food production going as soon as you can. And since we're in sand right here, we can just carve out an area to start making food from. Alright, so there is a lot of stuff to think about in the early game, and the better you get at the early game, the more you'll be able to get stuff done quickly. Like, getting your initial stuff set up within the first season, like, that's gonna do a whole lot for you in being able to, like, survive. Now, this isn't enough space. I already know that. And I know that, but you wouldn't know that. So here's the thing, is once you start up from there, you need to make a second spot for you to... Well, basically just, you need space. You're going to need space, and you're probably going to need a lot more space than you think you do. And the reason for that is because you need to stockpile things, yes, and you're also going to need to be able to work with them, which means you need space to put up the workshops. Now, ideally, you're going to want to set up workshops right next to stockpiles that are material relevant, and possibly the drop-off spots for them as well. Like, The more efficient you can make the dwarves' pathing for picking up the materials needed to create stuff and then creating the stuff, the faster these tasks will get done, and the happier your dwarves will be because they'll have more idle time to go and drink and party and be merry. They won't have idle time if you just constantly got them set up on work orders and whatnot, but uh, the more efficient it is, the faster those work orders will get done, which in turn will allow you to give your dwarves more leisure time. Now, these... Right now I'm trying to get this done. Did they make the door? Yeah, someone made a door. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a door up. It might not keep the flies out, but I hope it will. So that's why the door is going up. Those flies are probably going to cause some things to rot faster than they normally would. Various vermin like that have impacts on your stockpiles and things. That's why it's usually a good idea to have cats and the like, because cats will automatically handle rats and stuff like that and keep your stockpile safe. Alright, so now these guys are digging this stuff out. This is setting up bedrooms for these dwarves. Having bedrooms for your dwarves keeps them happy, keeps them from throwing tantrums and all that. But you can also just set up dormitories for them, and that will also help in that regard. And dormitories are better than nothing, and so on. I'm trying to think of what I actually need to express that isn't like just basic here. Let me think. Okay, it's almost been the first month. So, alright. We'll just let this go for a second. Alright, now here I know that that this sand is going to take them less time to mine. So I'm going to go ahead and set the the priorities by going to the advanced. That's something that you're going to want to do sometimes, and that's how you do that, is the little yellow arrows. And this works with pretty much all of the ordering functions. So, and it will stay on when you switch functions, so remember that, and don't set up engraving orders on priority 1 if you want them to just do them whenever they feel like it. Alright, so now we've got some sand space here. That's good. It makes it sand and like pretty much a lot of various of the soil types are easy to make make farm plots on. I think sand you can still make farm plots on them. And like I think a 5x2 is really all you need for plump helmets to keep them happy, fed, and in drink for the early game. Like 5x5 can can sustain a fort of like 200 dwarves or something like that of just plump helmets and regular soil if it's getting dealt with by legendary planters and stuff like that. So that's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna set it all to plump helmets. And it's important that when you do your farming, you check and make sure that you've got all of these set. Fertilizing isn't super important if your planters have good skills, but it does improve the yield of your crops. So if you don't have skills and you've got available fertilizer, fertilizing the fields is okay. It's not super important though. If you ever want to make sure that your miners are only mining and not doing hauling and stuff like that, you can just click these little things. And if you want to do that from the labor screen, that's also an option. If you want to make sure that your woodworkers only chopping stuff or doing whatever. They will do their own needs and so on, rather than just sticking to whatever you've got scheduled for them, even if you do set them to only do that labor. Alright, now that we've got some more space, we can make some more workshops. Another important workshop early is to get a mechanic. A mechanic allows you to make gears and stuff, mechanisms, which are necessary for creating levers and drawbridges, which are extremely strong as far as preventing your early demise is concerned. Now, since we've got that, we make rock mechanisms. And by making the rock mechanisms, we're setting up to close off the front of our base with drawbridge. This is a vital step for pretty much any fortress that wants to survive for a long time, is to have those mechanisms early. Because you don't know when your first threat's going to show up, and so by creating them early, you know that you're pretty well safe. The other thing with mechanisms is you're going to want some more of them, because they're also useful for traps. And you can set up early like stone fall traps to handle wild creatures that are getting too frisky. So yeah, you do want this early, and if possible, one of the first things you want to do is set up a well somewhere in your fort. So, I mean, once you've got a well set up, that makes sure that if dwarves are wounded, or if you've got kids who don't want to drink booze for some reason, they don't dehydrate. And it also helps with animals and stuff like that, because when the well runs dry, the animals might not get their water if there's a burrow order, or if they're pets or something. Ah man, I figured this would be a lot easier to explain, but it really isn't. There's a whole lot of different stuff going on, and it's fairly simple, but there's some complexities to how you do stuff. So, alright, that's done. Now, just for the sake of demonstration, we're going to go ahead and queue up this lever. And like, we can make more stockpiles and all that, So, like, this should be a good stockpile just to save the plump helmets in. I'll just put this for all food, because that will include the seeds and the plump helmets themselves, and that's fine for now. Get stuff off of our cart anyway. And since we've got that stockpile set to all food, this one set to all, we can make a couple of adjustments to, like turning off corpses and trash and food. That way they put the stuff in the appropriate stockpile. It's important to remember your stockpile settings and adjust them as needed. Making efficient use of the space that you've got is really important. Okay, so our miners have finished. We've got our next little staging area. We can set this stockpile up for whatever we want. But what's important now is that now that we've got this area, we can make some things. We need to make a chair. Just one. And that would be called a throne when you're dealing with rocks. So we make ourselves a rock throne. As soon as someone decides to do it. Oh, they went and grabbed it. People are hauling using the wheelbarrows. Alright, that one's done. Now we need to link it up to the drawbridge. That's how you can create an early and effective way to keep all of your dwarves safe. Alright, now this is the basics, okay? This is the basics right here. We've got a farm plot. It's just a 5x2 with plump helmets, and that is enough to keep up to like 20 dwarves fine with drink and food. And we can go ahead and put our still in here. And we can also put our fishery in here. Like, I don't really care. I don't care too much. I want to explain things more than I want to set this up to be functional, because I'm probably just going to delete the world when I'm done here. So here's the deal. Dwarves need the food, right? You need the kitchen, the fishery, the still. They need drink. They need places to do that. Those places will make them happy. So, at any rate, like we've got. What's important right now is explaining why I'm setting up this drawbridge. Why I'm setting up the drawbridge is because when drawbridges are raised, they are considered like part of the wall rather than a construction. So most creatures that would destroy buildings will not destroy drawbridges. And because the drawbridges raise and create a wall, they functionally seal off whatever areas behind the wall as long as it has no other gaps in it. So this area behind this would be completely safe. Like, let's say a bronze colossus showed up right now. I can't deal with that. I don't have steel weapons. If a bronze colossus ever shows up to your fort and you don't have steel, do not try to fight it. It will kill you. Use trap cages or cage traps instead. These right here underneath the traps. Cage traps. You want to set them up out front and have at least 3 spaces for any caravans to approach and put their stuff into the trade depot. But where you set up your trade depot doesn't matter too much. Just keep in mind that if your trade depot is easily accessible to the entrance of your base, and one of the trade people is a werebeast and you've got werebeasts on, they might be able to transform if they're visiting during a full moon and go in and kill all your people. So You may want to keep your trade depot somewhat separated from your fort, but still safe. You know what I'm saying? Because you're probably going to want to create stockpiles near your trade depot in order to better facilitate moving goods to and from it, and so you're not waiting half of the season for them to finish loading up the trade depot when you selected a bunch of things for them to bring to it. At any rate, I'm talking about this lever. Did I explain it? Did I give a good meaning? Like you see, I bring this up, it walls this off. And also drawbridges can also be closed down to atom smash things, and that just deletes them from the game. It's a good way to take care of lag if you've got far too many of something, like a bunch of corpses that just refuse to rot or go away. Okay, so that's like the basics of your fort defense. Now I'm going to explain something else real quick, and that is going to be your military. You're going to want to set up a militia commander through your nobles in order to get access to the military. And it doesn't really matter who. If they've got skills, that's great. And then you want to set them up, create a squad, pick the uniform. Just a note that leather sucks. Metal is far superior. Even the worst kinds of metals are superior to leather. But leather is light, and it allows them to train the armor user slightly. Metal armor is still just going to be vastly better, though. And the archer uniforms are set up on leather by default so that they can move better. But to be honest, having that set up, I noticed that they got injured far more frequently, especially when they ran out of ammo and ran into the fight. So, you may want to set your archers up on some metal armors as well. Now, in dealing with the military, this is important, okay? This is like the main reasons that I wanted to do this tutorial. Is the military, yeah, you assign your people to it. Yep, okay, good. You understand how to do that. You click here, you pick someone, they're now in the squad. Alright, there you go. We've got these people here. Now we click this check button. That allows us to change orders on the squad. We can clear their orders, order them to train, order them to defend an area, or actually patrol burrows is what this button is. We can set up patrol routes for them, but like we can order them to stand in one spot and attack anything hostile in the area, and we can order them to attack individual things like, yeah, kill that dog. Only that dog's ours, so they're not going to kill that dog. They will kill hostiles though. Alright, and so those are the buttons. This disbands the unit. This will get rid of your squad. Don't press this unless you mean it. Alright. This, once you've got someone checked, you can't issue orders if you don't got them checked. Once you got them checked, you can go to their equipment, right? And now, we've got these guys set up on the default metal armor, okay? Now, what they're gonna have them do is armor, headwear, legwear, handwear, footwear, shield, buckler, individual choice melee, and it's worn over their clothing with exact matches. So they want metal types of all these. Now, the thing about that is that the various armor types in Dwarf Fortress have differing levels of coverage. So, if you want them to wear all their stuff, you're gonna have to set it up on an exact match only with the uniform replaces clothing. Alright, and if you really want to make maximum use of your squad's abilities, this is the best loadout that I am aware of, okay? And I don't think there is a better loadout for it. You want metal mail shirts, and you can have up to 3 metal mail shirts. Alright, because of how the layering system works, 3 of these will fit on your character. However, each one of these has a weight to it, and depending on their armor user skill, it will affect their movement. For the early game, you should probably only have most of your squads with a single metal mail shirt. Next up is a breastplate. Breastplate is a shaped piece of armor. Sorry about that, had to cough and get a drink. Alright, metal breastplate is a shaped piece of armor. Shaped pieces of armor mean that no other shaped pieces of armor can fit, even if they would fit for that size slot. And that does not mean that nothing can be worn over top of a shaped piece. It means that nothing can be worn that is also a shaped piece for that slot. Now, we've got the breastplates. The real winner is that you can also put a cloak over top of your breastplate. Okay? Now, it may take some time for your squads to fully gear up and put on all three of these. The ordering may also be important. You may need to put their underlayers before their overlayers. Now, cloaks can be worn over top of the armor, and I think you can wear up to 6 cloaks. So you could potentially have 3 metal mail shirts, a metal breastplate, and 6 cloaks just on your body. But you can just do 1 or 2 if you want, and they'll still function as intended. The layering just adds slightly more. It doesn't add too much more, but like if someone tries to pull off a piece of their armor, they're going to pull down a hood or a cloak first. So it's a good idea to have at least 1 outer layer on your chest and on your head. Now for headpieces, the caps are inferior to the coverage of helms, so you want helms. And you want a hood. And you can wear up to 3 hoods or 6 hoods or something like that. Hoods, you can wear more than just 1. Okay. But like I said, the weight of all this armor is going to affect your character's movement speeds, so you want to consider what you're having them equip carefully, and not give them too many mail shirts before they've got the armor skills in order to move around in them. And as far as leg wear goes, the best setup is going to be a pair of trousers with greaves. Now there are foreign options, which is stuff that you can get from killing others or trading. But for the most part, I'm just going with what is available to dwarves, alright? And this is how this is going to work, or how it's going to look anyway. Now, once you got your leg wear, you also can do metal gauntlets, which have better protection than gloves. And you can wear mittens over top of those to give even better hand protection. Okay? Now, for footwear, this is tricky. A lot of people have trouble with this because they don't do the replace clothing option. They do the worn over. So you can wear socks underneath boots. Yeah? So you want high boots. High boots have the superior protection. So there we go. And then as far as shields versus bucklers, bucklers are lighter, shields are heavier, but shields have superior protection and will block more shots. So you want shields. And then they've got the individual choice on their melee weapons, and you can also set that to whatever you'd like. But there we go, that's the basics. And we'll go ahead and save his uniform as metal melee. And now we can assign the uniform to the whole squad. Now they'll all equip that when the materials for them to equip it are available. A couple other things to bear in mind when you're dealing with the military. That was basically just the equipment explanation for how to set them up on the best gear that they can possibly have on. and I hope you paid attention to the layering portion of that, because that's your late game changes. Once they've got their armor user skills set up, you give them more mail shirts, you give them more cloaks, you give them more hoods. And hopefully you've got plenty of all of those, so that they just keep stacking them up until they're basically just walking around in big layers of crinkly, you know, cloaks and hoods. Alright, so the next thing that you need to think about when you're doing your military is their scheduling. Alright? If you want them to be off duty but still wearing their gear, you need to specify that. Like you can set it to equip always and give them no orders, but they're just, instead of off duty, it's going to say no orders, which means that they're going to stay in their gear. As for why you want them to stay in their gear, there's an issue with dwarves and their backpacks when we're talking about the military. Currently, like when they receive new orders, when they're off duty and all that, they like empty out their backpack. And so when they switch from military to civilian in their off-duty months, they will dump out the contents of their backpack, and vice versa. So, in order to avoid having rotting food laying all over your base because you decided to issue a couple of orders during a month when you had a siege or something, it's often preferable to make sure that your squads are set to equip always. If you're not doing the tactic of scorched earth, just get rid of all backpacks, never touch backpacks, never buy them, never create them, etc. Personally, I like having my squads have food in case I got them stationed on a place for a while. That way they won't run off to eat. Sometimes it's necessary because, like, I'll have a goblin siege that I'm setting up for. I want to give them enough time to all gather out in front of my drawbridge before I drop it down. If they've got backpacks, they're a lot less if they've got backpacks and water skins, they're a lot less likely to run off to eat and drink when I'm trying to amass my force for a counteroffensive. Okay, so that is the main reason that you want them set up on equip always. If you don't deal with backpacks, they can set their equip to orders only if you want it that way. This function, I don't know. I think this allows them to sleep in their room if they want, which will improve their mood. I think this one allows them to sleep in their room or the barracks, and I think this one only allows them to sleep in the barracks. Or if you've got it set to this, maybe they only sleep in the barracks if their room is unavailable or too hard to get to. I don't know. That's a function I'm not sure about. Now, for advanced training, like, we've only got 2 in this squad at the moment, but a lot of people make the mistake of setting training orders for 10. A lot of times it'll be hard to get 10 soldiers like all synced up without anything to do other than train for a whole season or for a whole month or whatever. So generally what you want to do is figure out how many soldiers you got in your squad. Like, let's say we had the full 10, and then queue up enough orders for all 10 of them to train. That way, when 2 of them are idle, they start training, 2 of them are idle, they start training, 2 of them are idle, they start training, 2 of them are idle, they start training. I'm not certain if this goes through the list and makes sure that, like, people who have already trained that month don't train again or not. But if you do have some fanatic trainer who you're only getting, 6 dwarves trained every month because it's him and 4 other guys, that might be okay. But knowing that you can set the training up on this sort of schedule rather than setting it up the other way is quite helpful, because you can also overdo it, and they might not fulfill these extra orders by the end of the month, but at least they're there in case someone didn't train. So that's the basics of training. Now it's saying I've got multiple orders right now because I probably also have them stationed. No. Oh yeah, it says multiple orders because I've got training set for that. Yeah. Now normally when I'm doing my military setup, what I do is I like to set them on staggered training with them on no orders, and then give them a month off duty. That way they can take off their armor and replace their trousers and socks if needed. Like, it's probably not necessary, but I like to do it that way. I still get some rotting food, but it only happens once a year. And I have 2 squads set on alternate staggered training in 2 different barracks. I've got my own sort of setup in rough joined right now, but if you wanted like a staggered training or constant training, and you do want to use backpacks, I would recommend that you have at least 1 month off if their equipment, is set up like this. That way they can change their socks and trousers. Plus, it gives them a month off of the military service to go out and do normal civilian things. And if they're idle during that time, it'll give them a good mood boost because they'll go and they'll drink in the tavern and they'll do the normal dwarf things. Alright, that's the military. Okay. Those were the main points that I wanted to discuss about that, just because that helps. As for actual battle tactics, pretty much station, attack, and patrol are the things that you're going to want to use when you're dealing with threats. Like, let's say you've got troglodytes coming up a stairway that you've dug down to a cavern or something. You want to have your soldiers patrolling that stairway to make sure that none of the troglodytes make it past your traps and go into your main base and start attacking civilians and messing up all your work. If you've ever got like a sudden invasion, you might want to set it to a burrow order defense, and then that way everyone who can be fighting in the burrows is fighting in the burrows. But that's just the basics of military, alright? Next up, let's talk about your nobles a little more in depth. They've all got these various requirements once your fort reaches a certain size. Like, they'll want a study and a dining room and all that. You can basically just a chair with a table is good enough for a study. The room size and the quality of the room will impact what it is. So you might want to set up big rooms for them with statues and other fancy furniture in them just to bring up the quality and make sure that all their minimum needs are met. You don't got to worry about it too much, although you may get some seriously angry people if you don't solve their stuff fast enough. Sheriff, it's not too important of a thing, but it does help because when you've got a sheriff, it allows them to track crimes that are going on in your fort. If someone's throwing a tantrum and beating people up, that's disorderly conduct. They need to be punished. If they aren't punished, other dwarves might get mad that the law isn't being followed, and this is just anarchy, So a sheriff is good. A hammer is basically the executioner who dispenses the judgment. A sheriff does need an office so that they can interrogate people, and they're going to have other wants as well to go with that office. A manager is someone who allows you to create work orders, and when a manager has a chair and an office zone set up around that chair, they can organize your work orders, which are these, Work orders allow you to set up tasks ahead of time. Like, let's say you wanted to make sure that you got some clay, and then you wanted to make sure that the clay was used to make jugs. You could set this, and then you could set that. And now you know that you're going to collect the clay first, and then you're going to make the clay jugs next. And you can set these conditionals here to change like the time frame or check if other things are available. And then like for this one, you'd want to make sure that the previous order has been completed before. So you'd set that. You want to make sure that you've got enough fuel to actually do the order. So you'd set that. And you want to make sure that you haven't already done the order. So you'd set that. And there you go. And then you probably wouldn't want this once you set in the conditionals, it automatically goes to restarts daily. You might not want it set that way. You might want it done monthly or seasonally or yearly. You know, if you set it up ahead of time. If you've got everything set on daily orders, I did that on my fort for a while, it'll eventually create a whole bunch of backlog because there's going to be a bunch of orders that are calling for the same materials, and some of those materials are going to be used for earlier orders, and then the rest of those orders are going to give you feedback cancels because the materials that the orders needed are no longer available. Alright, let's see, what else? That's the nobles, yeah. You want a chief medical dwarf, that way you've got someone to manage your doctors. When you've got a chief medical dwarf, that allows you to do stuff in your hospital. I mean, basically. Broker, that's the person who's going to be trading with your. Your broker is the person best suited for trading with the broker is the person best suited for trading with the caravans, and also they assess the value of your fort. So you want someone with a high appraisal skill in this position. The chief medical dwarf, any medical skills are fine for that, although diagnostics and surgeon is probably preferable. Your manager is going to want to have organization skills. Hammer doesn't matter, although you might want to pick someone who's weak with and give them a crappy hammer if you're concerned about them just absolutely demolishing any troublemakers. Your sheriff's going to need social skills in order to do better interrogation. And your militia commander, that's military and leadership skills. Leadership skills are actually pretty. They're not too important, but they can change the outcome of battles. Bookkeeper, that's someone. They keep track of stuff. I think they want organizer. Yeah, that's what I said. And then messenger, that's just someone who goes around and gives various things. They're usually used to send off to different locations or to like issue decrees within. People will, if they can't find the mayor or the expedition leader or whoever, they might yell at a messenger instead, and that'll help. But that's how that works. So nobles are pretty important to get set up and have them working properly. But once they're set up, they're okay. If your nobles die, you do need to replace them, and don't get. People say like burn the nobles once they're getting upset about stuff, and visiting nobles, I assume they do nothing for your fort, and so that's why people are like, yeah, set up rooms that just flood or release a forgotten beast on your nobles, something that kills them but doesn't negatively impact your fort. Just because like they take up resources, they have demands, they're dumb. But Regular fort nobles, those guys you want to take care of. You want to make sure they're properly cared for. You want to make sure that they're happy. And you also want to make sure that these roles are filled. If you ever want new squads, you need to set up militia captains, captains of the guard, whatever. Alright, next up. What's next on the list of things that I want to discuss? I sort of went over work orders. Yeah, I explained them with the manager, I believe. And yeah, like I said, changing the time frame on your work orders is real good. And like, the more you know about how many materials it takes to create something and how long it takes to create stuff, the better you can manage your work orders so that you're not dealing with any errors or issues during those times. If you've got your work orders set up properly, it's probably going to be like a monthly or seasonally thing where you've got enough gathering and creation work orders to set up the other productions that you've got set for the rest of the month. Like if you wanted to make full suits of armor and weapons for your squads, then you've got big stockpile of hematite, and you've got enough smelting orders to make sure that all that's gone, and you've got enough coke to make sure that that's gone, and if there isn't enough, then you've got enough orders to set to burn coal or charcoal to get those done, you know. And basically work orders become a big supply line test, and if you get them all set up properly and you know what you're doing, then you can have a functioning fort and barely have to do anything and only have to make some manual orders whenever you want specific things. Let me think. The labor menu, this is all kind of just basic. I already explained, if you click on that, it makes them so that they only do their assigned labors. But you can also change this up here so that everyone does it or no one does it. Yeah, some of them you can't do it like that, but for the most part, it works. Some of these are set that way because they take time or require specific gear setups, so... And like, there's other ways to manipulate how dwarves will do labors. Like, you can go into here and change what their priorities are. You can assign them to workshops or only have them work in certain locations. And if they're hunters or soldiers, you can assign them war animals or hunting animals. I don't know, I'm running out of the stuff to talk about. The zone setup. Oh yeah. You definitely want to set up your zones. And you want to basically use pretty much all of these in various times. You're going to want offices, you're going to want bedrooms, you're going to want dorms for before you've got bedrooms set up for all your dwarves. You want to set up a public dining hall at some point, and you want to make sure that the food is available at the dining hall and easily accessed by the dwarves so that they don't opt to just go and stuff their face out of a barrel or go and eat it in the drinking hall or in the tavern if you know. And your nobles and other important people are eventually going to want their own dining hall, which means that you need to set up their own individual dining hall. And sometimes that'll be for them and their spouse or whatever, so you might want 2 tables and some stuff in there. Barracks, that's where your squads are going to train and do stuff like that, so it's important to have one of those set up. Your pen and pasture, if you've got any pasture animals, they will starve themselves if they aren't set up on pastures because they'll just keep going to meeting areas unless the meeting area is in a grazing zone. So you need to set up a pasture if you've got horses, goats, llamas, that sort of thing. Archery ranges, I don't know how they work. I wish I did. I set up an archery range. I got targets in it. I got ammo in it. I don't ever see Mark's Dwarves using it. If you assign the squad to it, it should work. If it doesn't, try deleting the archery range and resetting it and setting the squad to it. Pits and ponds. If you want to throw things into a pit, you set it as a pit. That allows you to empty stuff out of cages into pits where they can fall for a long distance and possibly die or be trapped forever. It's a very useful thing to use. Ponds are very useful for the early game when you want to set up a well. If you dig an area, boom, boom, boom. When that is done digging, there will be a space below it where water can fill. You set it up as a pond, you put to automatically fill. They go and they grab stuff, they fill it up. You put a well over top. Congratulations, you've got a functional water source in case you need to seal up your fort. Let me think. Okay, I was going through zones. Garbage dumps, those are good. Garbage dumps have more uses than just dumping garbage. If you're capturing goblins and other things in your traps that are holding items, you can set their cages up and then put dump zones over top of them to just make sure that when you issue the orders to have them stripped of their weapons, armor, or whatever, they drop the stuff right there on the spot and they don't have to move the cage. Water source, that's useful if you, right as the tooltip says. If you don't have a functioning well and you want to control, like let's say you don't want them running all the way out to this brook because, oh man, that's a long distance for them to be running. But you do have like a pond or some other sort of fresh water source, which they're not currently using, but won't kill them and isn't stagnant, then you set it up like that. Or like let's say that you cracked into a cavern a few layers below and it's got a big, nice fresh water source. There you go. Animal training, they need this zone. If you want to turn an animal into a hunter or into a war animal, you need a training zone. There are some quirks about this, and it's mostly in dealing with like semi-intelligent trainables such as goblins. And that is like sometimes goblins will never go to the training spot, and so you can have dwarves sitting there waiting for them to train the goblin, and the goblin never shows up, and they just stand around until they die of starvation. So what you do is you just create a temporary training zone in a place where you've got a goblin and the trainer locked up, and there you go. Alright, next up, dungeon. Dungeons are important. Dungeons will allow you to punish your prisoners. When you got a dungeon set up, you can put cages and ropes into it, and people who have committed crimes will be kept in those cages and ropes. And they will be kept there for a certain amount of time until whenever. By the way, when I'm talking about justice, you need to go to this. When crimes happen in your fort, they will pop up in the justice menu. When you have something happen that can be dealt with by your sheriff, you will get a report here with any witnesses, and then you click a button over here to allow you to interrogate a person if you so desire. But if there's a ton of witnesses, you may just skip the interrogation and go straight to conviction. But usually you'd want to interrogate them to boost your sheriff's social skills. So you have them interrogate, then you convict, and then they'll go to closed case, and you can see the convict and what he's done and how long he's been in jail or what his punishment was. And then once that's done, it'll go away. And then you've got your fortress guard thing right here to show who is available to arrest people and stuff like that. And then cold cases are cases that you didn't handle in time. And like you can take care of them, but honestly, after a year, like, what have you been doing? Did you just completely neglect that guy's tantrum when he started beating on all your people? Intelligence, that's where reports from interrogations and so on will show up. If there's any plots or things like that, they will show up as well. Sometimes you'll get people who want to come in and steal artifacts or cause other trouble in your fortress. And if you've got a good information network and people are reporting the crimes, you'll see that information here. Object shows any good stuff that you've got that's underneath any of this. Nobles already covered. Work orders already covered. Labor already covered. Places already covered. Tasks. This is an important menu. If you've ever got a whole bunch of tasks that were getting canceled and you don't know where they went and you don't want to go through them all and uncancel them or unsuspend them, look at this menu and anything suspended will be popped up in here. See, like that. And you can change who is assigned to jobs and stuff like that in this menu. So this menu is good. All right, just keep that in mind. And then creatures. Here's your dwarfs. Also important. Here's all your livestock. It's an easy way to keep track of everything. This gelding icon is quite important. This butcher icon is quite important. This icon allows you to set them up to be tame or available as pets. These will train them as hunters. These will train them as war. This will assign trainers to them. These are the other things that are in your current area that you are aware of. See, I've got a skunk and an opossum. I can go and I can see that opossum. Alright, and when you get like invading goblins and stuff, those will show up in here and you can check them out and get accurate reads on their numbers rather than trying to look at them all scattering around the map. Dead missing is exactly what it says on the label. Stuff that's dead or missing will show up here. That's all those covered, and I think I covered all that. I told you about the mining. Be careful when you're digging. If you dig down into a space that has already... If you dig stairs down into a space that is already open, like let's say I was to dig stairs down from up here into this, the stairs would stop at this level and they would not form at this level. And when I went to go, and when I would go to construct a new staircase up, that would also not work here. What you're going to need to do, I believe, what you can do in that situation is you would want to use this designation to remove the stairs above and then construct the stairs from below into the area. It's backwards, but that's how it works. There's issues with building up staircases into down staircases. And that's mostly because you can't just build a single up or down stair from the construction menu. It has to go over multiple layers. If I could just build an up stair here, that would solve the issue, but I cannot do that in this version. Alright, let's see. This is exactly what it entails. It adds a ramp. They're useful. They're as useful as a staircase, but they can't. But they need. But they're different. They're different. See how that's shaped? See how it's got the corner? If I took out these two walls, or if I took out this wall here, that ramp would just be flat. It would, or maybe it would just be a ramp up. It would just turn into a little triangle. I'm not sure, but at any rate, ramps will fall down if they don't have something to keep them up on, I guess. Maybe. But they're also useful. They're good. You can do some interesting things with ramps. Channel. I showed an example over here. I was digging a well, but let's say I wanted to dig a whole freaking pond for some reason. Then I could do that, and then all of this space down here would be opened, and that would be, you know, like if you ever want to just cut stuff out. Let's say you wanted to drop a continent on someone. What you would do is you'd go up to a certain spot, and then you'd dig out all the way down, 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 and then there would be a spot where you'd need to channel out in a couple of spots, and then the whole freaking thing would fall. Okay. um. What else? Yeah, this is an important key. Okay, this removes stuff. All right, you got some ramps, some floors, some stairwells, some walls, whatever, and you want to remove it, you use that. You don't have to build a new floor, you don't have to do any of that. You click that and someone will eventually come along and destroy whatever it is that you built. Now, for certain things, like doors and so on, you can just do this, right? But for stuff like constructed stairwells, basically these construction things, a lot of these you're going to have to remove using that designation. Yeah, remove stuff. This one here. Chopping wood, that's exactly what it says on the tin. Gathering plants, I showed you an example of that earlier. Smoothing. This improves the value of any rough stone surfaces. It's good for dwarves. They like it a lot. You can engrave after that. That further improves it, and it improves it quite a lot. And if you've got quality engravers, the amount of improvement starts getting real crazy, and you'll start having a lot of value just from having your stuff engraved. Tracks, minecarts. I don't really use minecarts. I'm sorry, I don't have a lot to say about that. Fortifications, those are important. Like any sort of areas where you're gonna want. First you gotta smooth, then you can fortify, then archers can shoot through it. But you've got to. There is a caveat to it, which is that like highly skilled enemy archers can also shoot in. So if you're going to be dealing with fortifications, make sure that you're not dealing with some crazy skilled archers on the other end. I think that's it. That removes designations. This is constructions. Do I want to cover any of this stuff in detail? Let me think. Stoneworker, that does stone. Soap is important. You're going to want to, if you want soap, what you're going to want to make sure that you do is when you have some tallow, I don't think it's always going to show up, but when you've got fat and then you render the fat, you're going to be left with tallow. And tallow will get cooked, and you want to not cook it if you want to make soap out of tallow. And then the other thing is you're going to get like lye and other items that will allow you to create the soap. Alright, other things. Siege, that makes ballistas, catapults, and their appropriate ammunition. I haven't used those, but I imagine that they're quite fun. And that they're probably useful against some things if you can set it up properly. I've heard that, like, having an invading force get a gate opened up to them that has a whole bunch of dwarves manning sieges will just rip through them. So, there you go. Screw press, this is useful. Dwarves do it. It makes things. It's important for extracting fluids and stuff from certain stuff. Metalsmith, that's what it says on the tin. You make metal stuff here. Mechanic, like I said, one of the most important shops. It allows you to create mechanisms, which are important for traps and other buildings. Magma Forge, that's the same as the Metalsmith, but it's powered by magma. And that means that you don't need fuel in order to run it. So anything, once you have access to magma, if you can safely build stuff on it, you're good to go. That's what you want, because that solves so much of your fuel issues. You don't have to worry about finding coal. You don't have to worry about finding charcoal. A lot of your stuff is just automatically fired. Jeweler, this is a very important shop as far as increasing the value of your goods goes. You can encrust stuff. Stuff can be encrusted multiple times with multiple different kinds of jewels. It's good. And on top of that, a lot of these, your dwarves will get strange moods and they'll want cut gems or certain kinds of gems, and you're going to want a jeweler. Crafts, it makes a whole bunch of different stuff. And a lot of it might not seem very important, but a lot of these crafts things are liked by dwarves a lot, like toys and stuff like that. And so having them in your fort will improve the mood, and plus some of them can be sold for quite a bit, and you can make a lot of different instruments here at the crafts. And crafts and instruments are great for selling, especially if they're well crafted, and they're also great for moods in your fort. So the crafts are great. Carpenter, that's just wood stuff. Bowyer, that creates bone and wooden crossbows. That's okay. Metal smith is far more desirable for crossbow creation, though, because when your dwarves run out of ammo, they will of course run up and try to bludgeon people to death with the blunt end of their crossbows. So that's why you want metal crossbows. Ashery, that makes a few necessary components: lye, potash, milk of lime. That it's good for some of your more advanced needs, like fertilizer and dyes and that sort of stuff. Furnaces, you got it. You got your glass. That's important. Kiln, yep, that's important. And you can also do magma versions of all of these, except for the wood furnace. And the wood furnace is useful. It creates your ash and it creates your charcoal. Smelter. Smelter is the most important one in this list, as that is where you're going to do all of your ore refining and creation of coke from coal. Farming, yeah, I went over that. You want a butcher, that way whenever you've got too many animals, you can butcher them and get easy stuff. If your butcher has automatic orders going, if you kill wild animals, you will also butcher them in a timely manner. Uh, if you got a tanner, that will also help, because when you butcher stuff, the remaining hides aren't good for very long, but a tanner allows them to be processed into leather quickly, and then the leather won't spoil, unlike the hides. Fishery, that's important when you've got fishers, because you need to process the fish and clean them before they can be cooked. The kitchen, that's where you cook and do a few other important things, so it's rendering fat, I think. Farmer, that's where a lot of important stuff gets done in regards to your plants and your crops. You might want an extra farmer shop, you might want two, but you're usually going to want them real close to either your pasture or your crops. Kern is an unpowered millstone. Vermin catcher shop, that helps take care of your rats and things like that. Uh, it's kind of useful to have one. Nest box, that lets you pick up eggs. If you don't have a nest box, your fowl, your birds will not lay. But if you do have a nest box, they'll start laying eggs for you, and that's a big source of food. And it also lets you have more birds, because if you're not collecting the eggs, they will hatch into chickens, or whatever bird it was. Hives, those are good too. It lets you make mead and things, and keep bees. And the bees may sting things, but I don't think that's a big issue. And clothing, leather, lets you make leather stuff. A lot of leather stuff's good. Limbs, that lets you collect webs and make cloth. Clothes, that lets you use the cloth to make stuff. And dyers, lets you dye the cloth. All that stuff's good. Furniture, a lot of this stuff, yeah, you probably know it. Mandatory for every bedroom, though, is a bed, a chest, and a cabinet. They want the bed so that they can sleep. They want the chest to store their stuff. They want the cabinet so that they can store their clothes. You can also include weapon and armor stands, although they aren't going to use them. It's currently kind of bugged. And that's for bedrooms. Chairs are important for dining rooms, taverns, that sort of stuff. Tables, same. Offices as well. And then burial, you can do tombs real easy. You can set up one coffin here, and then you just put a single tomb slab over it, and then you've got a single grave. Normally when you do coffins, if you set up the multi option and try to highlight a whole bunch, it's gonna pick a door, and then it's going to pick one coffin out of that room and associate it with that door. So it's a lot easier to just do single graves unless it's someone important who wanted a better tomb for themselves, and then you won't have to deal with ghosts. Uh, oh yeah, I stopped after dungeon. That's the explanation for tombs. Fishing, that sets your fishing area. If you don't want your people going out to a crazy fishing spot, you can set somewhere safe. Gather fruit, that's what it does, what it says on the tin. However, it's important to note that when you select the area, it not only includes the fruit that's going to be on the ground, it also includes the fruit that's up in the trees on that area. So if you've got this option set, they will get step ladders, they will climb the step ladders, and they will pick fruit out of the trees. And they will also pick fruit off the bushes and off the ground. But if you turn this off, they won't pick it out of the trees. Having that on does create a risk. If you do not have enough step ladders, and you're picking fruit out of trees, people will run up, they'll grab the step ladder out from underneath someone who's currently up in a tree picking fruit, and then that person will be stuck up in that tree. And you will have to build a ramp or stairs in order to get that person down from the tree. And if you chop the tree down, that person will likely die. So, if you've got fruit gathering zones set, make sure uh, that you've got enough step ladders to use the gather fruit and trees option. Sand, that's what it says on the tin. You find some sand, you create a sand collection zone. They collect sand there. Clay, same thing. Find clay. Set a clay collection zone, they collect clay there. Uh, Alright, that was a sidetrack because I saw the burial. Slab, if you've got a slab, if you've got someone dead who you can't recover their body, you can build a slab, and then what you need to do after you've got a slab is you need to engrave the slab, and then you put the slab somewhere, and that functions as a burial site, and that will keep their ghost at bay. Statues basically just improve value and look cool. Traction benches, these are important for when you're setting up a hospital. In order to set up a hospital, you go into a meeting area, yada yada. Once you got the meeting area set, you can create different things. And enter a tavern, that's where dwarves will go to drink and where adventurers will go to rest. If you do set up a tavern, it's advisable to later on set up attached bedrooms onto it. That way, if anyone gets too drunk, they can be taken to the bedroom. If you've got a tavern keeper assigned and no bedrooms, and they pass out from drinking too much, the tavern keeper will just go and keep feeding them booze until they die of alcohol poisoning. So having bedrooms keeps that from happening, and it also allows your visiting adventurers to have a place to stay and store their gear. Temples allow dwarves to go and socialize and worship their gods. These are important. They're going to want specific temples when there's enough worshippers of them. And for the most part, you can set up a non-denominational temple just as a basic for early, and that'll take care of most of their needs. Library is where they will go to study books and keep the books. And so having one of those is good because it improves knowledge. Now, what the knowledge actually does might not impact your game very much, but it does impact your dwarf's quality of life, I would say. Because the smarter that your place is, the more fancy your dwarves are going to feel, and that may improve their mood. Guild halls, that's going to happen when you've got enough workers and particular types. They're going to want a guild hall, and guild halls are great because when guild halls are set up and people are hanging out in there, if people outside of the guild hall go in there to hang out, they will learn skills if there's demonstrations and stuff taking place. And a hospital is where you take care of your wounded. There are a few necessary things for a hospital, though. What you want for your hospital is you're going to want
chest so that they can keep all this stuff in it. You're going to want to make sure that you've got thread, your cloth, splints, crutches. Powder for casts may be hard to come by. Gypsum powder, not the easiest to find, at least in my experience. You want buckets so that your dwarves can drink, and you want soap so that they can clean themselves and prevent infection. And on a lot of these options, you're going to see these up at the top for these medium places. If you set it to all visitors welcome, you may get people coming from outside of your fort accessing sensitive areas that you don't want them in. So your best option is going to be citizens and long-term residents for the most part. That way the people accessing these areas at least have petitioned you for citizenship before they're all up in your fancy temple with 3 different artifacts on display pedestals. Oh, one other thing, in regards to temples. Do not put statues in your temples. If someone fights in a temple next to a statue and they knock it over, the gods will curse them to become a werebeast. Do not fight in your temples. Do not put statues in your temples. Just a PSA. Okay, there we go. That's done. And that covers all the meeting areas and all those zones. And yeah, we did traction bench. We were talking about that because of the hospital. When you set up your hospital, you want a water source right next to your hospital. Put it right next to your well. That way your dwarves don't dehydrate waiting for someone to run all the way out to wherever you got your well at. Traction bench is used to set things and so on. Traction bench, you're going to want at least one in your hospital. You're also going to want a table in your hospital, and you're going to want a bunch of beds for the injured dwarves to sleep in, and you're going to want chests in your hospital. And then you can do whatever else you want. Instruments are going to be hard to build because you're going to actually need the instrument. Doors, hatch, those are what they say on the tin. It's important to note that doors will not keep out wild animals on their own. Having other stuff is helpful to that. Certain types may be kept out by doors and hatches, but for the most part, animals will not respect your doors. Constructions, walls, floors, ramps, stairs, bridge, all this looks pretty normal. Paved roads may be good if you're trying to create a particular path and you want to keep track of it, and then build like traps and other things to handle people who aren't caravans or visitors. Fortifications, I explained those before, but you can also construct them. Wall grates, those are useful if you've got like an area that's just pouring water. Floor grates, same deal. These will keep items and dwarves from getting pushed out by water, and so will these. These will allow dwarves to see things through the windows, and they also have value. Supports. Yeah, those are. If you've got nothing other than some floors connecting a bunch of walls and things, it may drop to the lower level. This is usually why I just skip a level in between all of my floors on the fortress, so that I don't ever have to worry about cave-ins and collapses. Tracks, minecarts, yep, and track stops. Those are minecart adjustments. They do stuff. Machines and fluids lever lets you attach it to other things like drawbridges and traps and cages and things like that. Wells, those are important for having a water source. The wells will always draw off the top of a water source, so even if the bottom is murky or bloody or whatever, if they're drawn from the top and there's enough water in it, it's not going to be bad water for the dwarves to drink. I apologize about my voice. I'm not used to talking this long, and really I'm probably going into entirely too much detail about this, but I figured I would give everyone my tutorial on Dwarf Fortress and explain everything I could in as much detail as I can. Floodgates keep floods out. You want to set these up before you crack into a river to move water. Screw pumps, those are manually. Those are ways to move fluids and whatnot manually, or with like power, either through water wheels or windmills or whatever. Uh, but screw pumps can also be used as like gems. If you want some real buff dwarves, you got them working screw pumps all the time. They'll get ripped. Uh, Water wheels, those help generate power. You got to create water that will actually move underneath them. But if you set up like a self-contained little water space with water wheels, they can power themselves through the water motion after a certain point. Windmills, those work off wind. You construct them above ground. If you want to connect them below, like you put them up here, you put it there, and then you build your gear right down there in the middle, and then it will no longer give you the this thing can only be built on top of a this thing, or there's no base for the, like if you, like let's say you wanted to build a surface windmill somewhere safe, that way no building destroyers would come and crush it, and you set it up, and then you dug a pit underneath it in the center spot. You build a vertical axle there, and then your windmill will power through that vertical axle to whatever's below it. Okay, that's windmills explained. If you're ever trying to build higher walls or something, you're going to want to build scaffolding, which will basically just be floors suspended in the air. Like, you build a wall here, you want to build the wall higher, you build a staircase up, then you build wall or floor along that wall, and then you build the outer wall up more. You do it this way because even though you can walk on top of the constructed walls after you create them, your dwarves will rapidly get themselves stuck if you've only got like one staircase for them to get up on the wall on. So that's why you want the floors for scaffolding. Um, let's see. Gear assembly, that's, yeah, that links stuff so that you can change directions and so on. Horizontal, vertical, millstone. Millstone is what you're going to want to put under, attached to some grinding source, some power, some automatic powered source. And rollers let you, yeah, they power mine carts. Cages and restraints, you can set up cages with things in them and wherever you want. Like let's say you wanted to make a zoo, you can build the cages to put the zoo out wherever you want it. You can do the same with animal traps, and you can also set the animal traps up and then bait them on the spot so that like you can automatically catch rodents and things like that. Ropes and chains, those are useful for holding prisoners in your dungeon, and they're also extremely useful for stationing like stray dogs hunting or war out in front of your base entrances as an early warning system against thieves, wildlife, that sort of stuff. They'll sniff them out and give you advanced warning so that you can close gates or whatever if something's too dangerous. Traps, pressure plates will activate traps. Stonefall is a self-activated trap when something steps on it. Weapons same, cage same. Upright weapon spikes, those they function as like a death pit, but you can also set them up to pressure plates or switches so that, or levers so that you can pull them and they all pull up. Like, say you create a big entrance tunnel into a cavern, and you've got drawbridges on both sides, and some forbidden beast comes in, and it's a flying forbidden beast, and you've got one Z high level tunnel for them to run into through that drawbridge entrance, and you get them in there, and you close it up, and you've got the whole floor lined with the spikes set up to a lever, and you pull the lever, and now that flying creature would otherwise avoid all those traps is getting spiked because it's up against the ceiling, and you can keep doing that until it dies. It's a useful tactic. It's a very useful tactic. I haven't used it myself, but it's a very useful tactic. Archery targets, yep, those are for the archery range. Weapon racks and armor stands, those are pretty much broken at the moment. Ballistas, those are these are pretty much broken at the moment, but they're still useful for adding room value and satisfying the needs of nobles and stuff. Ballistas and catapults, those are your siege weapons. You can set those up and then launch them by assigning dwarves to operate them. And then the last one is your trade depot, and you just want to set that up somewhere where the people can access it. Like you can put it inside your base somewhere, and if they can get inside your base to get there, they'll get there. But you'll probably want to put it outside somewhere. That way you don't have, like I said, you don't have some werewolf trader coming in, changing during the full moon, and then infecting half your base. Let's see, what else? That was all the stuff. I think I've gone over all the different stockpiles and why you'd want to change stockpile types. It's also good to get real specialized in your stockpiles if you're wanting to make sure that you export certain items and make them in certain ways. And I already went over all this stuff. Burrows. Burrows go hand in hand with your military with this drawbridge here. And I add a new burrow. And I set all this behind the burrow, behind this drawbridge. Boom. And I hit OK. Now whenever something bad happens, all I have to do is... Alright, now right now this burrow is suspended, and they can access stuff outside of it. Now they will not leave this burrow, and they will stay in the burrow. And I assign all my dwarves to the burrow. And there we go. And now if something was happening, they would run inside the burrow, and they would not come out to do anything until I suspended the burrow. It's extremely useful for keeping your dwarves safe. This is possibly the top tip, is to always have your burrows ready, or on the first sign of danger you create a good burrow and then immediately enact it so that all your people go into it and you can pull up your drawbridge and be safe while you prepare your military to respond to the force. Okay, hauling carts for minecarts, that's that's and then high and low traffic areas, this is actually quite important in regards to pathing. Like if you've got a bunch of single wide hallways that are creating traffic jams and pathing issues that are slowing you down, you can set them to a lower thing, and dwarves will naturally avoid using them if there's too much foot traffic in those areas already. I think that's about it. Oh yeah, this is the last one that I need to cover, just to go over the basic aspects of the interface. This will allow you to claim anything that's been forbidden. Normally arrows that get shot by invaders will get forbidden as they're shot, or arrows that are shot by your own people until the siege is over. And the reason for that is because you don't want people running out and gathering up arrows as stuff is happening. Forbidding stuff will allow you to stop dwarves from doing certain actions and take care of things that they shouldn't be doing. Dumping allows you to get rid of certain items, like melting. This is also real important. That lets you get rid of a bunch of stuff that you don't want, but it's metal, and you might want to make it into something else. Removing the hidden designations. I think that just affects stuff that you're personally hiding. And that's about it. This world screen, this is important too. Alright, from this world screen, you can do stuff. You can see news and rumors if there's anything happening. People will tell you about what's going on. If there's stuff happening on civilization, you can look at various things that are going on there and see what kind of people are doing what. Missing citizens, this will be lit up. If you've got any missing citizens out on the thing, you can send her on your fort. And if you got capable military squads, you could send them on missions to other areas to raid, seize, or possibly destroy other places. Though some of this stuff is kind of bugged. And now I have the hiccups. And then reports will give you feedback on what happens during your missions. And art. Oh, excuse me. All right. Sorry about that. Okay, so artifacts will give you a list of all the currently created artifacts and their last known positions in the world. All right, so I think that's it for there, and then we'll talk about up here. If you mouse over up here in the corner, it'll show you the wealth of your fort, created wealth, imported, exported, etc. This is important. As your wealth rises, so do the threats you will face. Your population, this is kind of self-explanatory. It tells you how many dwarves you have here, and then it tells you how many dwarves are happy, sad, etc. And you definitely want to keep them more above this area than down in this area. The more angry dwarves you have, the more likely you're going to see some tantrums, and depending on who is throwing the tantrums, it could be very bad for the overall health of your fort. If you click this button up here, it provides you with a screen of all of your stocks that you currently have available in your fort. This is a good window to go into if you're looking for specific stuff, like if you wanted to melt down some things to get a metal bar real quick because someone's about to go mad because they didn't have their strange mood needs met. There you go. That's a useful spot right there. This shows you stocks. Once you get your office set up for your manager or bookkeeper, once you get your office set up for your bookkeeper, they'll go in and they'll do counts on your stockpiles, and you'll get accurate counts for these things. This shows date and the moon phase, so that you can be aware of when potentially werebeasts are going to show up. If you're real paranoid about it, you can always close up your gates whenever werebeasts are going to show up during the full moon, because that will keep them out. And certain creatures like werebeasts, thieves, and child snatchers, they are stealthed on entrance, and so you won't get a notification until someone sees them, which means that you could potentially have a werebeast wandering around on your map for like half the moon phase, and then it finds your entrance and it runs in and it starts attacking people because no one was outside to see it before it made its approach. All right, this is an important thing. It allows you to shortcut locations on the map. Use this often if you don't like searching around to look at things. Man, this is probably something that I should have went over in the first part instead of right here near the end. This goes straight to the entrance, or straight to the surface. Boop, boop, boop. Yep. And then this goes to the lowest level discovered. This will show your water and magma depths, and this will show ramps if there are any on your scenery. I like having these on. It lets me know where places I can move up and down are and how deep water is. And I think that's about it. As like, this is the basics. I can explain more, but like from here it's mostly just minute differences between stuff and like that sort of thing. Once you get all your workshops going, they kind of feed into each other, so it's really a matter of getting the materials, getting your dwarves to all the spaces that they need, and then making sure that any threats that arrive don't totally demolish you. And that's basically it. That's Dwarf Fortress. That's my tutorial video. I'm sorry, I don't have anything else. That's like as much as I can possibly explain, I think. And I tried to skip through a whole bunch of stuff to just talk about it rather than like actually demonstrating it in game, because like it takes time to get into this. You actually have to do the steps before you can like be making the crazy zoos filled with all manner of marvelous beasties. But that's it. That's if you're watching my videos, you now have basically as much knowledge as I do in how I am doing stuff in the game and why I'm doing stuff in the game. And I hope that these explanations have been somewhat useful to you, because this took a long time and I really wore my voice out a lot more than I thought I would doing it. At any rate, hope this has been helpful, and I hope you, if you liked this, then I hope you might, scan through one of my playthroughs to see how my forts did and find some cool events that happened within those forts. All right, thank you for watching. Bye.